So yeah, man, super excited. Like I said, super excited because you're in the flesh now. And to be quite honest, I did some preparation for all of this, and I didn't realize how wise you were outside of real estate. And it was a lot of little things. Like, for example, you talked quite a bit about people's egos and how people's egos kind of take them down and screw them up a little bit. And I think that probably comes from a lot of your business experience. I mean, you've been doing this for what, 30 years or so?
Yeah. It's, I understand when you first start and make a lot of money, it gets confusing to a lot of people, and they believe that it's them. And it might be, maybe they're bold enough to make a move somewhere in something, maybe start a business, buy some real estate. But at the end of the day, it's just small little moment. And,
yeah,
you got to stay humble and grounded in this business.
Yeah, you do. And I think that goes with investing, generally speaking, because it always feels like you understand what's happening, but there's always a bigger fish that sometimes are pulling the levers, and you have to set yourself up in such a way that you're very flexible with those sorts of things. So, all right. So this is what I kind of like to do with folks that I interview, and it's a little bit different, but I've got about 10 words here, 10 or 15 words, and your job is to react to the words within like 3 to 5 seconds. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. And this is part of some of the research I did, so it'll be interesting. All right. You ready for your first word?
Yes, sir.
Zeke Jones.
Oh, Olympian.
Ron Paul.
Politician.
Yes. Sparky the Sun Devil.
Hot.
What about Oak Creek? Does that ring a bell?
Yep. Orchard Canyon.
Yeah, absolutely. Federal Reserve.
Corrupt.
Love it. Dallas Cowboys. Off the cuff here. Let's see what happens.
Amazing.
MLS.
Fixed.
Yeah. Wrestling.
Amazing.
And last but not least, my friend, Leonard Litwin.
Mentor.
Love it, man. So we'll kind of get into this, and I did my homework, man. I think that's important. You hear this all the time. People get on a stream with you and they say, tell me your story. How'd you get started? So we'll just do that to introduce you to my folks here. And real quick here, what's your story?
Well, I started like a lot of people. I went to school, went to college. I was wrestling in college, as I think and then I ended up managing an apartment building while I was in my tail end, my senior year. And I got into the business that way. I learned property management, and I felt like it was pretty easy because, as long as you had good tenants in there and you collected the rent, did the maintenance, and kept the place looking nice, which is how I grew up. My dad was in construction, and my parents worked hard, and so for me, it was like a duck to water. And then when I went into the corporate world, I got a business degree, and I thought I was going to get into finance, but I just really liked property management, oddly enough, and I went to work for the company that was managing that property, and that turned into just an amazing career. I went to this group at the time. It was called Goodman Management. It was owned by a guy by the name of John Goodman. And John, started giving me more and more properties. I started managing more and more properties. I started learning more. I started learning how syndications were put together. Started learning about, successful purchases and bad purchases. And
yeah,
how people make lots of mistakes. The property management world, if you're not sending a check to the ownership, you're probably going to get fired. So and there's a lot of reasons why that can happen. It can be poor management, sure, but it can also be a poor purchase. It can also be a badly structured partnership. And so there's all these things that you learn. It's kind of like the inner workings of a property. People, I think a lot of people believe that buying a property is the hardest part, but actually having it produce cash, if you buy it, is the hardest part.
And a lot of that comes on the front end. You got to really do your research, right? That's where you make your money.
That's right. You make your money in how you buy it and how you structure it. And that's, I think a lot of times when people are investing in real estate, they get the courage and maybe they have the money, but they don't realize that those are two of the easiest things.
Sure. Now I'm going to take us back here real quick. One thing that I've noticed about, people who are successful pretty much in any industry or business line here is, a lot of these folks are pretty competitive, and the wrestling part is very interesting to me. And here's why. It's because I actually put my kid in wrestling, 6 years old, very recently here. And I'm kind of curious from a sports aspect, has that carried over into how you did business in your early years and even now?
Without a doubt, there's a bunch of things that it does. First of all, wrestling, the reason why I like it, especially for a young man, is it's an individual sport and a team sport at the same time. So unlike basketball or football, everything kind of moves around and you have individual stars. But in wrestling, you can actually go on and be a national champion on a team that's not very good if you want.
Sure.
And so what always happens is, so I like that because it's both, it's both. And the wrestlers that are at their peak, they're the most disciplined people that you'll ever find.
Yeah.
To be able to like I'm going to the Olympics actually with Zeke in next month, and I'm going to watch USA wrestling and those guys, they're just, and women too, they're incredible athletes, and the dedication and the discipline that it takes is incredible. And so that definitely spills over to, just that hard working ethic, kind of how America was made, really. And it's just a spectacular sport, I think.
I think, and here's what's interesting for me. So I boxed. I'm going to get my son into wrestling. You even look at the UFC now, every good fighter has a substantial wrestling background. All the top guys, all of them. So I think that the cool thing about wrestling is if you get beat, you can't blame it on anybody else but yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. You can agree or disagree, but one of the biggest things that's lacking in our society is that sort of accountability. To be able to look at yourself and say, you know what, that's on me. What can I do to get better? What can I do not to make the same mistakes? And then you got to move forward. So I think that's huge from, just a character building standpoint for young men.
Yeah. Both my sons wrestled, and I used to film their matches on an iPad. And then I bought a wrestling mat for my house, and I had full wrestling mats with the circle whole deal.
Nice.
In my home. And we would break them down, and so you're right. They would go out and like early on, they would just get their butt whipped. And then I would show them, what was going on. Right?
Yeah.
And so they were slowly, getting better and better just by obviously reviewing film, breaking it down and making adjustments. Right.
Absolutely, man. That whole process is so important. You can carry that process over into anything that you do in life, that self-reflection, figure it out, adapt, change, move forward.
I was playing golf yesterday with a friend of mine, top college football coach. Mm-hmm. And he's recently retired, and he's like, I go, what are you doing in the mornings? I'm still breaking down film. And, I had to laugh because, you have to analyze whatever move you made or whatever it is that you just done, even a good deal, bad deal, good relationship, bad relationship. It is kind of breaking it all down and saying, okay, what am I accountable for? What hand did I have in this? And how could I have done this better? That's essentially how you fine tune. Is you have to break down the film. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you got to tell me. So one of the react words that I gave you was Zeke Jones, and you kind of mentioned him a second ago. Maybe let folks know who he is.
Well, you can see I'm wearing the Arizona State wrestling.
Yep. Perfect.
He's the coach of Arizona State. He's a silver medalist. He's one of the most respected college football wrestling coaches in the country. He was the coach of the Olympic team last Olympics, and he's just an icon in the sport. And
yeah.
And I support the Arizona State team, and I live in Arizona, and I just think it's the greatest sport ever.
Yeah. Well, dude, I commend you, man. I think that these sorts of competitive masculine combat sports are very, very important for the development of young men, and I love the fact that you're supporting that.
Yeah, that's why I'm doing it. I agree with you. We're a pretty soft society.
Yes,
and it's getting worse, it seems like. And in wrestling, there's no participation trophies.
Nope.
Like you said, you go out, get your butt whooped, and that's it. Quit or you don't quit.
Yeah, you got to show up. You got to put the work in, or you're
Right.
going to get your butt whooped, because you can bet the other guy's putting the work in.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So, all right, let's kind of bring it fast forward again here. So you gained all this experience, you got into property management, you're learning business, you're learning people. If you go through any of your videos, you're really big on networking and being a part of the thing that you want to be in, right? And you talked about kind of climbing the ranks, and you're the head of this organization, the head of that organization. So now you've got a multi-billion-dollar company, right? So, how did you get to that point, and how's it feel right now?
Well, I never set out to do this.
Yeah.
I always set out, just like anyone does, I set out to buy one property and have a cash.
Yep.
And that, for me, that was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I used my own money, and it cash flowed a little bit of money. And then I just did that until I ran out of money.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, now I'm gonna have to learn how to raise cap. And I'm gonna have to learn how to, if I'm gonna scale this like I want to. And I didn't know what to do. I had never bought a property. I didn't know how to meet with a mortgage lender. I didn't know how to raise money. But I did know how to manage it. And I also knew how to spot it, because in the property management world, I could step onto a project. I could kind of tell at that point, okay, there's upside in this property, because I would have to manage those properties for those people. So I said, well, I should be able to figure this out. So I did. I ended up buying one property, then two, then three, and I got to tell you, Brendan, each time I didn't know, after 4, I started off with a secretary that would answer the phone. She did my letters. She did my schedule. She did the accounting. I mean, it was just me and one person. First,
Sure.
That was me and one person. That's me and two people. And I just, just organically, it starts really slow. I never had this 10-year vision to build, a $2 billion company.
Sure.
And so because it happens slowly, you can be really strategic and mindful about, who you need and what. And so now I look back, we got 300 employees and all these CEO, CFO, CIO, COO, I never hire those people.
All right.
But I had to go find those folks, and I had to become, that person to be able to, if I want to scale my business, each time I'm just punching through my own belief system, to be honest. And
yeah, man. So I'm going to kind of put this was interesting. You, one of your react words you talked about, I said the Federal Reserve.
yeah,
And what did you see? You said crooked or something like that, or corrupt, or let me ask you this, man, because this is really, really frustrating to me. I see people like you, and then I see the media's perception of people like you. And their perception is that you had to screw somebody to get to the point where you are right now. And what I see in my life experience is that you had to make so many good decisions, so many moral decisions and ethical decisions for so many years to get to the point where you are. And you're providing such a huge benefit to society. My question to you is, now that you're here, now that you've arrived as a multi-billion-dollar company, what sort of feelings do you have when you hear these sorts of things coming out of the media and from a political standpoint? Just curious.
Well, I kind of understand it. We've fallen from this kind of victor to victim mentality for whatever reason, and we're a socialist society now. So people rely on the government for money and for things. They want to feed them. They want them to, give them the stimmy checks, and they want them to give them the housing and all that stuff. And we're soft. Well, I came up a little bit differently, and I think, I don't care what people think. It's interesting. Like the government, every government, but not just the U.S.
Sure.
They reward people that produce, period. So if you produce jobs, you get tax benefits. If you produce housing, if you produce oil and gas or gold and silver or whatever, the government needs the private sector. And don't forget all the money that flows up comes from the public.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
People just forget, like, all the money that they're getting comes from other people anyway.
Right.
They just tax. They tax. I by the way, I don't say that it's a bad system. You just got to understand the system and play within the system. And so for me, it is interesting. And whenever I hear people say those kinds of things, I think it's just an easy cop out. It's, I think the people that are in the least control of their financial future or their lives are anybody that turns over all of those things to somebody else. So, I was having this conversation yesterday. Why make all this money and then turn it over to basically a commissioned salesperson in the form of a wealth manager or a financial planner?
Right.
And then just work your butt off. And then one day go, oh, was it invested? How was it invested? To me, that makes it doesn't make any sense. And so,
well, why doesn't that make sense to you? Just to dig a little bit further.
Well, first of all, it doesn't help the individual at all.
Okay.
There's always a constant battle between Main Street and Wall Street. Wall Street wants Main Street's money. They want it in the form of insurance policy. They want it in the form of a retirement plan or a 401k plan or a pension. I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. Is they're saying these people are working really hard, so I'm going to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. I'm going to incentivize them to put money into these programs and the employer matches and all that kind of stuff. That's the system. The same thing with the banks. When when you go make money and you put it into a bank, it's a problem for the bank because they actually owe you money.
Right.
They owe you it's your money, and they owe you an expense on that money. So then they take that money and they use it. And the same thing with insurance, the same thing with pensions, same thing with retirement plans. And so Main Street, it's a big marketing ploy. Main Street is what Wall Street wants. They want all the money from Main Street and all these different things. And there's all these really smart commissioned people making money off of Main Street. And then what they do, how does that money make money? So in other words, if 1,000 people go put their money into a bank, that bank has a problem because it's not their money, but two, they also expense. So
right.
On the interest. So then they have to lend it to guys like me. That's the system. The system, if they put it in an insurance policy, they have to invest it. Maybe oil and gas, maybe crypto, maybe gold, silver, maybe tech, maybe this, maybe that. Doesn't really matter. The point is they're just taking the money from Main Street and they're investing it for them. And it doesn't help anyone because and they've made it super complicated. Most people don't even know what their money's invested in. No. Open their quarterly statement and see, did it go up or not?
Right.
Meanwhile, that whole industry just makes 1% or 2% or whatever it is off their balances. So the whole system is a mess because the financial planner makes money when they get new accounts. It's not even based on their performance.
Yeah. And
mess.
It's a mess. And then, people come and they see some billboard and then it says, earned 1.5% here, high yield savings account. So then you take your money and you put it in the bank, and sure, they use some of those deposits to make money off of, but then they take a lot of that money and they go to a bigger bank and they say, I want to lever up. I want a 2x or 5x on that money. And they use the deposits as collateral. And that bank does the same thing to the next bank upstream. And then you've got the Federal Reserve that's involved in all this, that's, manipulating the Fed funds rate. And this is it's insanity to me, Ken. It's insanity. And I think that one of the only cures for this is for people to understand the importance of owning your own cash flowing assets. I think that's incredibly important. And I think over the next 10 years, 20 years, it's going to be paramount that people understand more and more of this.
That's why I do YouTube stuff and write the books and all that. Everything I do goes to charity. I have a full-time director of philanthropy the money that we make for these learning, call it books and whatever it is, all goes right back into financial education, because yeah. And by the way, the system is a system.
Yeah.
Not unique to the United States.
It's not.
We have a central bank. Europe has a central bank. The ECB. Japan has a central bank. Like this is the way the system is. And so the people that understand how it works, it's basically like playing the game of Monopoly, and once you understand that it's literally a game with rules, and now the rules do change from time to time, but that's okay. And all of a sudden your eyes open. You're like, oh, okay, I need to be outside of the system. I need to understand what it is. And then all of a sudden, that for me, the light bulb moment for me was, okay, I get it. Like Wall Street's basically harvesting all the cash from Main Street, and then it's putting it out in the form of all these different things, and it needs to get invested. So don't forget what actually pays everybody. It's entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, that the people are willing to take the risks. Yeah,
that's where all the money comes from.
Yeah.
If I buy an apartment building and I create a lot of value in it, and and it goes back to the investors, it just keeps flowing back. It's just the velocity of money.
Now, this kind of made me remember something that I wanted to get clarity for my audience here from you, and that is why does the government incentivize people who are willing to take risk, the private sector, incentivize them so heavily to provide these services for society?
Well, they're not very good at it.
Right.
Like
the government.
In my world, that by the way, I do believe in government. I do believe in social programs. I do. Like those are needed. We need a welfare system. People go through rough times and they need a handout. That's fine. It's turned where now they're using it to live on, and it was never intended to be that. And so for me, the system is fine. It's just gotten to the point to where people are starting to rely on it as opposed to understand it. If you just understand it, then for me, I always say just be the Fed. Like do it
right.
And the Fed's going into debt. Okay, it's a good time to go into debt, because if you're going into debt, then you're hedging inflation, right? And that's all. So when things are inflating, just take a look at like the house you grew up in. I was telling people this, like my mom's still alive. The home I grew up in, my mom still owns, and my dad, my mom bought it in the 60s, and it was $10,000 for this house.
Yeah,
they still own it now. Around the same time, they bought a $10,000 insurance policy, life insurance. I didn't know at the time it was $10,000, but my dad would always say to me, "Hey, your mom's taken care of. We're good." And back then,
right,
it was a lot, just like a $10,000 house is a lot.
Right.
So my dad passes away, which is horrible. But now we're digging into, what do they got? So now I'm like, okay, so it's like the tale of, it's like two different roads. Like the $10,000 policy is still a $10,000 policy.
Right.
And it basically paid for my father's funeral.
Right.
The home is worth somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. And so, my mom was a hairdresser. So I'm like, it should be that clear. What was the childhood home or whatever your first home that you bought that seemed expensive at the time, it's just going to inflate up. And then if you can just replace yourself with a tenant, have your tenant pay it off for you, you're going to get that inflation. You're going to, so I always say just buy hard assets and have your tenants pay them off. It's actually very simple.
Yeah. And I think that people they don't see all the advantages of owning real estate, which is, the debt's in your name, but you've got somebody else paying it off. you've got the tax advantages to that as well. And then also, not only are they paying it off, if you've done your numbers right, then you've got cash flow as well. And then also, as time goes on, due to inflation and other things and limited supplies, the values of these things shoot up, of your assets as well. So there's really, really big advantages here. And, I guess if you're part of the 0.00001% of the world's population that really at least understands this on a basic level, that's like the first big step to being, to being the person that you want to be. You want to buy your time back. And that's overused and all that, but it's so true, right? So education is very important.
Listen, I believe that we have a very hardworking group of people. Americans are hardworking people generally. They're certainly getting softer.
Sure.
And I also believe that corporations can be corrupt and there can be bad stuff going on, and so in the government, and that's never going to change. But people just got to take control of the financial future, and then do what they want. Like, period. Like that. It's why turn your money over to commission salesperson that really is not incentivized with your success? I don't get that. Like, I would rather put it into something that I can control a little bit. My sister was a bookkeeper at a medical clinic in a little town in Everett, Washington, where I grew up. And she slowly, over a period of time, just started buying a rental house here and a rental house here and a rental house here. She's got millions in net worth, and she never had like this huge retirement plan or anything. She literally was a bookkeeper, and so now she's completely financially set when she retired just by using the same model. Yes, there were times where they had to go clean units and maintenance units, and yes, they had some tenant issues time to time, but most of the time, you learn over time. Just find somebody that pays their rent on time, and you have a great reciprocal relationship. We're in a renter nation, so and if not you, who? Like, somebody's providing that housing, somebody's collecting rent. Somebody. It's not the government.
Sure,
it's the private sector, and so there's this resistance, and the real reason is Wall Street doesn't make money if people go out and are independent and create their own financial security. That does not make a nickel. So that's why that's why they always redirect you back to stocks and bonds and all these crazy marketing schemes to keep people poor and dumb, really.
Well, and I think like the 401k, like it's government sanctioned. It's one of the most marketed things in all of history in terms of a financial product. And the everyday working man dumps a portion of his paycheck, every single paycheck, millions and millions of paychecks every single month into the 401k, which is actually feeding Wall Street.
Right.
So people don't think about it that way, and they trust too much. And another thing I want to point out, and I'm going to ask you for your recommendations here in a second, but most people are only 1 or 2 skills away from getting way ahead. They just don't understand what those 1 or 2 skills are, and they think that those 1 or 2 skills are very, very difficult to comprehend, and they're not. That's been my experience. Have you seen that sort of thing?
Yeah, I do. People are pretty resilient.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's having an open mind and being in a different room.
Yeah.
Like, literally is. And what I've learned is, for me to be able to scale our business to what it is, I've had to unlearn and then relearn, because we all have we all have bias. We all have a software running in our brain that tells us, when we look in the mirror, we see something, and that is literally a reflection of your past. And it's the same thing with money. It's the same thing with relationships. It's the same thing with food. It's the same thing with exercise. It's the same thing with government. And so you always got to kind of keep that in check, in my opinion, because when somebody's talking, most people don't really listen to learn or understand. at all. They're just holding on to their own position. And so when to your point, when you start to realize that if you just have a little bit more of an open mind, then more stuff will come in. It's there.
Have an open mind. More stuff will come in. Let's quote that. I love it.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned so much, and what I Robert Kiyosaki taught me this, because what he is so smart. He's always reading 15 to 20 books at the same time.
Yeah.
Every time we get together, it's always the same thing. What are you reading? And I have really good friends that do the same thing. And we're emailing books and emailing podcasts and stuff back and forth to each other and texting each other. And it's always the same thing. What did you learn? If I go to a conference, he's like, well, what did you learn at the conference? Because Robert is probably the epitome of somebody that's always trying to change his view.
Yeah.
Things. And most people go through life with a really rigid point of view on whatever it is, and they just don't hear any, I don't know, they feel like there's risk there somehow, but it's literally, it's a software that's been developed from parenting and from teachers and mentors and coaches and experiences and, shocks that they've had, whatever it is. And that's who they are. That's where they sit. And that
I've been punished so many times, Ken, for thinking that way. I think I'm finally out of my wayward ways. It's because and again, it's ego. That's what I've seen you talk about quite a bit, where you sit up there and you talk to somebody and you hear what they say, but you don't listen to it. And you're really sitting there thinking that you know better than these people, or you're on par with these people. And it's like, I thought I knew, but I don't really know, but I'm going to act like I do. And that's not a good way to do business. And I think a lot of us go that route these days, a whole lot of us. And we're afraid to listen.
I'll tell you, one thing somebody can take from this podcast.
Yeah.
If you just sit and are curious and just ask people about what's going on with them.
Yeah.
What they know, what they think. I mean, I do this all the time. They'll go on and on and on. They won't even ask you a question. They won't even know who you are. And I'm just saying, I actually do that a lot, like every single day, because I'm always trying to find like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, wow. That's cool. And most people, that's not how conversation is.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable to me. But if you're just a little bit curious and also willing to shape the way you think about something.
Yeah.
And I've found personally that's my own little personal development, right?
Yeah, I think for me personally, podcasting is kind of like a form of self-therapy in a way.
Yeah.
Because you can't talk to but so many people on a podcast. And if you're talking about yourself most of the time, then you're not going to get too many people talking to you that much. And you really got to beat back your ego, and you got to ask the questions. And a lot of people are afraid to look like they're maybe intellectually weak by asking questions of somebody that knows more than them. And I know that sounds crazy to some people out there, but that's just the case. And actually, I've felt it, and that's that ego coming through. But it's so important to strip that away and just open your mind, because more stuff can come in, right?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it's true.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about this. So in the 2008 financial crisis, I understand that you were in the midst of executing on a pretty significant deal, but you had been doing that deal for a while. Can you kind of talk about what happened when the floor kind of fell out? What happened with that deal? And then I'm really interested to find out, like, how do you go about breaking that information to the people who decided to invest with you? And what's that look like? Because that's scary to a lot of people.
Yeah, of course it is. So some people went through 2008, some people haven't. But, a lot of the signs that I'm seeing right now are very similar. What happens prior to that, I think it's important. You don't see what you don't see, right? And so you plow through with this confidence and courage and maybe limited wisdom. and you believe that next year is going to be better than last year. And that's what's happening right now. So a lot of people bought, and so that period of time, I look at, well, that was a learning period of time because I lost money. I lost investors' money during that time. It was a condo conversions that we were doing. We were buying apartments and we were converting them to condos. And we did very well on a lot of, and then at some point the music stopped. And what happened was that Wall Street stopped funding investor loans because people started not to pay. And so the whole thing kind of came crashing down. And so I was in the middle of a project that was converting apartments to condos. So essentially rental housing to ownership. And we got caught in the middle of this project. Now, to this day, this one project's the only project that I lost investor money on, including my own.
And it still pisses you off.
Yeah, but I will tell you, you don't learn a lot of when you're making money. Like when things are going really well. Yeah, I knew that one. When they don't, that's when you learn. Like that's when the contracts come out. That's when the lender conversations come out. That's when the investor conversations come out. Try to unwind things. That's when you learn the most. And so that period of time, that was 2000. It was like 2007, I think, 2006. Don't forget, I wasn't the only one. There was, people.
So many.
The great financial crisis, hit after that, and banks started taking back all this real estate. And so there was a lot of pain in the area of real estate because people that owned real estate, it was worth less than the loans, and they were giving it back to banks, and the banks were taking it in the shorts, and the banks aren't supposed to own real estate. All this stuff was going on. Well, that's also an opportunity if you think about it. It's when it's easy to buy, things look really successful, right? When they're going the other way and the banks have a problem and real estate investors and real estate developers have a problem, that's actually when the best time to do deals.
Yeah, but you got to have cash or you got to have the means to do so. So you got to plan ahead for these sorts of events too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure. And so just go back to 2008, 2009, 2010. Just what was going on at the time, if you think about it, investors had lost a lot of money. Banks were owning real estate. Their stock prices were going down. There was all kinds of government involvement because they were trying to prop up everything and make sure the financial system. So it was chaos in the U.S., right? And so everything kind of went on standstill. And oddly enough, this period of time is what created the problem for the undersupply of housing because the banks were not lending in 2009, 10, 11, 12 because they were still, unwinding all this problem.
Sure.
And yet people were still being born and people were still graduating from college. And so the population was still growing, but there was no housing being added. And so what was happening is that, and then people were falling out of single family back into rentals. So the ownership of housing went up to about 69% during that time. And then it went all the way down to about 62, 63. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but each 1% is like 1 million people. So essentially, George Bush said the American dream, everybody needs to own houses. And so everybody was buying houses, these crazy loans, et cetera. And then Obama kind of got the brunt of it. But that all kind of poured back the other way. So people moved from ownership to rental.
Subprime mortgages.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's what made the rental market strong. So what was happening is there was a shift from ownership to rentals. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to be a landlord because you have people that were traditionally homeowners forced into the rental market. And so that's happening now, right?
Yeah.
Speak. And so when you look at it more on a macro basis, now the problem is as you pointed out, you either have cash or you find somebody with cash. And so for me, I was like, I went to Canada and put together some funds, big funds, hundreds of millions of dollars. And we started buying Texas real estate with Canadian dollars because the Canadian dollar was strong
Relative.
during that period of time. So if you're Canadian, the U.S. looked like it was on sale. Actually, the rest of the world, the U.S. looked like it thought.
So for the audience here, so if you have an economy that is not doing well and you're in a currency that's not doing well, what you want to do probably is you want to use the purchasing power of the strong currency, and you probably want to put your debt maybe in the weaker currency as well, and that kind of creates a spread and a margin. So you're saying that you use Canadian dollars to buy up Texas real estate?
Yeah, because again, if you're in Canada, I'll tell you, as a 10-year-old kid, my dad used to take me up to Vancouver, and I remember I would take a $10 bill, come back with $13 or $14 worth of change.
Yeah.
And so people didn't understand. I was hedging currency back then. I'd come back because in the U.S. they would take a Canadian quarter. They would take it out of like a 7-Eleven or a Circle K or whatever. And so I was basically, I was making 30-40% of my money as a 10-year-old. So I always watched the dollar, our U.S. dollar, as it compared to.
Yep.
And the Canadian dollar during that time, during 08, 9, 10, started to be about par.
Okay.
This is important because now imagine if you're in Canada and real estate is crashing and your Canadian dollar is now equal to the U.S. dollar. So Canadians are like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
I now have our dollar strong, the Canadian dollar.
Yeah.
And the U.S. is on sale. So this is precisely what happens when economies fall. Like, it doesn't matter where, it could be Zimbabwe, could be wherever. It happened in Mexico when they devalued the peso. The people on the inside, what they do is they put their money into, to your point, into countries that have a more stable currency.
Iraq, right? That happened.
Yes.
Is it the denari, or is that completely? Yeah.
Yeah, and this goes on. I mean, this is why you hear Russian oligarchs buying New York.
Yeah.
And this is why in the 70s the rich from Japan started investing in the U.S.
Sure.
And so start to see, when you really start to look at the way money moves, and you really need to understand how currency works. It's really, really complicated. Think about a company like Amazon, say, or Facebook or whatever. These are worldwide companies.
Yeah.
And so when you start to see how the money moves and how it's exchanged and where they're trying to keep it, it starts to become super clear.
Yeah. And I can't imagine how complicated that is to have these teams all over the world that have to monitor. You can make the wrong move in one country, and then that can really have an effect on the rest of the business. And this kind of brings me to another question I had for you. What about how AI, machine learning, is going to kind of play into real estate moving forward in relatively quick amount of time, next 5 to 10 years? Like, how is that going to affect things in your mind?
Oh, a lot. It's incredible what's happening. It's funny. I do a big conference every year in Dallas called Limitless.
Yep.
And it's this year, it's August 29th, 30th, 31st. And one of the guys that I really sought after, his name's Eric Siu, S-I-U.
Okay.
Incredible guy. And he owns media companies, but he's going to talk about, essentially where AI is heading, how you can use it in your own business. For us, we're seeing it in every single way. I mean, the customer wants things super easy. So in customer service, we're seeing it in virtual tools.
Oh, yeah.
On all our paperwork, and we're seeing it in accounting, we're seeing it in marketing, we're seeing it, automatic. Everything's becoming automatic, and I think we're at the very, very, very beginning. And unfortunately, it's going to replace out some of those lower paying jobs.
Yeah, that's going to happen, but it's also going to create new sorts of demand in the economy. For example, I read a paper recently called situational-awareness.ai. That's where it's at. And it kind of outlines from a gentleman who was in Silicon Valley, who came out of OpenAI. it outlines, what the world's going to look like to be able to prop up and be able to support the infrastructure necessary to create these machines. And one of the things that he talked about was a massive shift in GDP spending towards building out cities of power grids, just absolute cities, concrete companies. You've got the superconductor manufacturers, any companies associated with nuclear energy, any companies associated with natural gas. The United States has huge stores of those. So there's going to be a huge infrastructure shift, it seems. And I think that's also going to affect real estate in many different parts of the United States and the country, because the government's going to have to buy up a lot of this land to put this infrastructure on as well. Yeah. Tell me about that.
You're right. No, I tell you what, people, just in the political world, they've got this Green New Deal, which everybody knows.
Sure.
By the way, I think we should be looking at all these things, but it just doesn't, the math doesn't work.
Right.
But now you're going to start to see, because of AI, these nuclear power plants, period.
Yep.
I mean, people are talking about, Musk is talking about it, and guess what? Bill Gates already broke ground on one in Wyoming. So it's already here. And nuclear power plants are definitely needed in order to run, because of the energy that's needed for AI.
Yes.
And so, to your point, we're at the very beginning, but the insiders already know, and the government is going to be shifting their narrative very soon.
Quick.
Nuclear power. You watch. The next 10 years, it's all going to be about nuclear power.
And it's got to be, because it's a national security thing. If China is going to be investing this sort of money in the energy infrastructure, and Russia is going to be doing it, the United States has to do it as well.
Correct.
Because if their machines, because they have more power, their machines are stronger, then that's a weakness for us. So we got to keep up. It's like a race, arms race.
You got it. That's exactly right. So they're gonna have to shift their narrative, because the whole world's doing it.
Yeah, love it. So I'm going to shift real quick here, and I like to keep these at about an hour. Okay, I think that's reasonable. So there's going to be a lot of people that listen to me here. A lot of the folks that listen to me, they're more politics related and crypto, and I give like a macro perspective of what's going on. What can regular people do, man? And what can they do to change their lives? I will say to the audience that I endorse Ken because I have gone through his programs and understand his stuff, and he's a no fluff type of guy. He cuts straight to the chase, but I don't know what sort of things you have educationally right now for regular folks to win.
Yeah. You got to step back from the whole thing. First of all, look at it from a macro standpoint.
Okay.
And I think you start there, because that actually provides the direction. So, do you believe, and do we believe, that we're going to see a lot of inflation in the next 10 years? I would say the answer is yes to that.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons, and we go down all the crap. So we definitely have that. Do we believe that we're undersupplied with U.S. housing? The answer is unequivocally yes.
Right.
It is a math issue. You've got the population going like this and not caught up. So we're undersupplied on housing. That is a yes. And it's starting to show up already in the higher rents and the higher housing prices and stuff like that. Okay, so you have those two things. Those are going to happen. Then, do we believe that the cost of house is going to be more as a result of those things? And I still think the answer is yes. There's going to be periods of time where there'll be some softness in some areas based on construction. But if you really think about it, if you follow the Federal Reserve, they have been increasing rates, as we know. And so what happens when rates go up? People pull back.
Sure.
That's what the Fed wants. The Fed wants the economy to slow down.
Kill the economy. Yeah.
Okay, so that's happened. So what did that do? That stopped the new construction of housing, not completely, but largely. And yet people are still being born. And then now you sprinkle in immigration, which is a super political issue, but it's also a housing issue. So, you can step back from it and bitch about immigration, or you can just look at it practically and say, what's going on? Well, there are cities and states that are master leasing hotels, and they're master leasing apartment buildings, and they're building housing, and they're providing money and all that kind of stuff to these immigrants. Okay. That's a population gain. Okay. So all of those things are going to happen now, and you just can't argue that. Okay. All right. So knowing that, I believe that we're going to head into a very unaffordable period of time for people. It's going to really start to show up in the next few years. You're going to start rents go up, and the housing prices are not going to slow down anytime soon. So it's going to just shove more people from home ownership into rentals. And Brandon, as you know, what's supposed to happen, like I have young kids in their 20s. They're supposed to go out of school. They're supposed to build their credit through some kind of rental somewhere, work for somebody, put some cash away, buy that first house, and then build the equity from there. That's a traditional system. We're not in that system right now. There's no affordable housing. Rates are high. And if the Fed lowers rates, it just creates another bubble. So that's the situation we're in. And so people can get angry with it, or they could say, okay, how do I benefit from that? And so for me, we've decided to buckle down, hunker down, and start to buy as much housing as we can, because there's going to be more renters. And this kind of goes back to your other point. Well, that's taking advantage. We're taking advantage of a situation that we're not in control of. It's just going to happen. And so what people can do today is they can start to look at affordability and understand that that's going to be a huge problem moving forward. And you might even be in a situation where you're going to buy things, and inflation's going to do its thing, and the government might even give you the cash to your tenant or to you to provide housing. We have a housing problem. And so, a really simple thing to do is just look for affordable housing, provide affordable housing. I think you're going to start to see this ADU, accessible dwelling unit. It's going to just spike over the next 10 years. You're going to start to see relaxed zoning for tiny homes. You're going to start to see 300, 400 square foot homes. I met with a woman the last 2 weeks ago. She's doing a 350 square foot homes up in Canada, into areas that are unaffordable. And the government's liking those because, the rents are less. And that's the opportunity. And anybody can, affordable housing is not sexy, but it's going to be where it's at for the next 10 years.
Well, there's going to be a need for it. So somebody's going to provide that, right?
Yeah.
And what about my listeners that, we've got doctors and we got lawyers and we got all sorts of folks. Like, what sort of things can they do to take advantage? I understand that you might have something to talk to them about as well, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think the hard assets is where it's at, so if you're going to, like, I'm in oil and gas, I'm in gold and silver, but I'm in real stuff like physics.
Right.
I paid. So Chris, one of my friends, Chris Martin, who's coming to our Limitless conference, talks about the 3 tiers of wealth. At the very base, he calls it primary wealth. That's water, that's timber, that's gold, silver, oil, gas, all the stuff that comes out of the ground. The second category are the companies that can extract that. You can invest in those. And then the third, at the very top of the riskiest, is paper, all the derivatives, the ETFs, the stocks. And so if you just focus on that core base, and those are hard assets, they'll move with inflation. So, so that's just a simple little strategy. So when you mentioned Oak Creek, the Orchard Canyon property I bought it because of the water right.
Okay.
I bought it. Yeah, it's the water rights are really, really worth a lot.
Right.
And so you start to take a look at the world differently, and you don't, the worst thing you could do is turn your money over to somebody else and not fully understand what is invested.
I think so. If I'm putting myself in your shoes, as you gain this experience, you're able to kind of You're able to size up the world and then differentiate what has value and what doesn't based on your experience and be able to seize on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And do it direct.
Yeah.
Like anyone can go buy a silver coin or gold coin from somebody.
Yep.
And I've been doing that for years. And so have my friends. And, by the way, I'm not a gold bug. I don't actually buy it for investment. I'm actually buying it to hedge the dollar.
Just got it. Most people, yeah. And you feel like gold's just going to go up over the next 10 years.
I do. Mm-hmm. The reason central banks are buying it, and the U.S. is printing like crazy.
Yeah.
World's kind of not very happy with us because we're the world's reserve currency. Dollars are, everything's traded in dollars, not everything. And they're starting to wean off of that. Other countries are. And we're using the dollar as a weapon. And so people are converting their dollars into physical metal.
Yeah.
That's definitely happening.
Yeah. Well, Ken, man, it's been a really good conversation. I appreciate it. My goal is to kind of make this interesting and not the same mundane sort of interview. And I think people got a good opportunity to kind of peek into who you are outside of real estate as well. And I appreciate you being open with me about that.
Of course, Brent.
Yeah, man.
Good chat with you, man.
Yeah.
It's a fun project.
Yeah, it's great. Your social media sites, kenmcelroy.com. Where can folks find you?
kenmcelroy.com. Just go there. Our company is MC Companies, MCCOMPANIES.com. The big thing we got coming up is our Limitless conference. We have 50 speakers, 3 stages. We got about 2,000 people. And, we have crypto guys there. We have oil and gas. We have gold and silver. We have obviously some real estate. We have a lot of entrepreneurs. We have marketing and people that are killing it on YouTube. So it's kind of it's a financial freedom conference. So
yes,
I'll be at that personally. I'll have my whole team there.
Okay.
Super excited about that one. And that's it's called Limitless. It's called limitlessexpo.com.
Okay, perfect. All right. Limitlessexpo.com. Outstanding, Ken. I'm going to stop this now. You can hang around here in the green room, but I really appreciate it again, man.
Anytime.
All right.